Hello, everyone. A very good afternoon to all of you. I am Priyanshi, welcoming you all again on behalf of Solar Quarter and First Tree Group to the second day of CNI Energy Show 2022 Southeast Asia. Hope you had a good time networking with your peers today. Now it's time to start with the second day of the conference. But before that, I take the opportunity to thank our sponsor, Platinum Partner Goodwe, for extending their immense support to organize this event. Requesting my team to play the sponsor video. Thank you so much, team, for playing the sponsor video. Now, without any further delay, let's begin with our first session of the day on technology trends in the CNI solar market in Southeast Asia. We have in our esteemed panel Mr. KK Kong from Marco Solar, Mr. Weber Sahu from Sun Energy. He'll be joining us in a while. Mr. Wu Guin from SkyX Solar, Mr. Samrit Goyal from Solar Horizon. Now I welcome all the panelists on the screen and requesting Mr. Kong to lead the discussion. Over to you, sir.
Hi, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this Southeast Asia Energy CNI uh, event. So, thank you so much. And we have these two gentlemen here, Sam from Singapore, Solar Horizon. Um, then the second speakers here, panelist is Mr. Wu, the head of business development, SkyX Solar. So probably I give probably 1 2 minutes to let the panelists to introduce themselves. Start with Sam.
Sure. Thank you, KK. It's good to connect with you again. Nice to be back on
Yeah,
the webinar today. I hope the attendees had a good day one yesterday. Anyway, just a short, brief introduction. Solar Horizon is a developer for CNI, solar PV in Singapore. We've been based there for more than 10 years, and our specialization is the rooftop CNI sector. Um, we're primarily a developer, but over the years we have learned how to do EPC as well as financing. Hence, we are now a kind of nucleus model where we are working with multiple partners to create competitive solutions for Singapore market. Last thought I would share is looking forward to today's discussion, particularly from a more technical perspective. So we'll try to keep it in more layman's terms so everybody can understand. Looking forward to it. Thank you, KK. Over to you.
thank you, thank you. Yes, Sam has been in the industry for many years and very experienced. Anyone that want to explore this region or Singapore market, you can look for him. So how about Mr. Wu?
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Vu and I'm the head of development for Sky Solar. We are a subsidiary of EDF Renewables, a pretty big utility company, the third largest one in the world. So we started out as a developer, but now we're moving to, instead of EPC like Mr. Sam, we're moving toward the investor role as well. So developer investor. So we are the market leaders in CNI solar rooftop in Vietnam. At the moment, we have about 70 megawatt peak projects, and by the end of this year, we are shooting to have around 100 megawatt peak. And in the last few years, Vietnam has been a really big booming market. So we are very lucky. Um, so yeah, so very nice to meet you guys.
Okay, thank you. Yes, SkyX Solar is one of the reputable companies in Vietnam. Uh, so I look forward to meet you in person in future, Mr. Wu. So as for myself, I'm a EPC. So we have been doing EPC work in Malaysia for the past 9 years, and involved in these two market segment, the CNI and also solar farm. So and yeah, so anyone that interested to explore Malaysia market to do get in touch with me. So definitely there are rooms for synergy and collaboration. So without further ado, um, the today's topic is about the technology trend. Okay, in the CNI solar market for Southeast Asia. Okay, so um, I guess probably the first question is which type of module that are now moving forward. It has been from poly to mono, okay, and what's the trend now, okay, for the audience here. Probably Sam can share some insight about this topic.
Yeah, thank you, KK. It's actually really interesting that we have different players in the value chain, right? Where we have yourself, KK, who is a hardcore EPC. I know Marco. I know you guys have been fighting in the market for many years. And of course, Wu, everybody's familiar with EDF. And it's good to know that you guys kind of got acquired and moving up into IPP space. But ourselves, we are honestly mainly developers. That's our core game. So it's really very interesting to get different perspective because all three of us are linked in the chain, right? Investor, developer, EPC, and of course the client. So I'll share from actually recent experience a couple of interesting things. One is, as we all know, module sizes have been getting bigger, right? When people see the nameplate, it looks like the wattage is increasing. So a lot of people think the efficiency is increasing. And while it is, there's no doubt that module efficiency is increasing. The truth is, the reason we have more power per panel is because the panel is physically bigger, right? And they have more cells. In fact, they have what's called heterojunction cells nowadays with multi layers of cells. So, in short, versus the core cell technology becoming more efficient, it is module technology that can gather more cells within the same square meter, in a sense. So with that, what we look at is, which module choice fits the project right. So for example, KK, and I believe we could just have a discussion between the three of us, like there's just three, so
Yeah,
we can keep it as
yeah.
a nice
Oh,
open discussion. So KK, you mentioned solar farm, and actually this is very interesting comparison because, for example, the new
ah,
660 watt panels, the bigger one, the super size, they seem to work very well for solar farm, right? Because you have less BOS, less cabling. However, on CNI, recently we came across that the panel is so big, sometimes it doesn't fit through the door or the entrance to the roof, you know? So there's these kind of installation challenges, which are different in module choices. And I'd love to pick your own brains as well as from Wu. And maybe we can discuss how that panel choice impacts the customer, the project from our respective experience.
yeah. Wu, maybe you can chip in.
I mean, it's just from an investor, I mean, developer experience. Like, so I work a lot with our clients, face to face. I'm client facing. I have a client facing roles. So I think for clients, they would be happy to look into. I mean, say okay, with the same size, and we can have a more a bigger system, which means that more energy generated for the clients, I mean, it's also we can build bigger system, more profit, more revenue for us as well. So I think from a technology's perspective, it's really good for the clients, and we are going to the right directions.
Hey,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. It is pretty. In recent years, it has been quite a very confusing development for solar panel, as in the cell size. 210, 180. So various cell size and the panel size, and the voltage and ampere is very different. So it's very confusing to developers and also EPC like us. So, but hopefully this stuff are moving forwards. Are converging to more standardization. That would be encouraged. So that is one of the view of EPC from my side, where the CNI panel is getting more and more heavier. It's a
Mm,
challenge,
mm.
for the installation team, in terms of safety and in terms of putting it on the rooftop. Uh, so these are some of the things that probably, hopefully, their audience here that are solar panel makers, take note of those things.
Yeah, make it easier for us, lah. Give us some standardization. But let me just ask you, KK. I'm actually really keen to pick your brain here, which is, so for CNI for rooftop, do you, as an EPC, as the actual installers and the guys on the ground, do you have a preference between the 550 class or the 660 class? What do you prefer? I mean, of course, from developer perspective, we make more money in a sense, or investor perspective, the owner. But from the installation perspective, what do you personally prefer and why?
I guess if it's more higher power class, then we can save on some of the BOS, balance of systems. So yeah, as much as we wish to go for higher power class, but in terms of the workmanship, the weight getting heavier, uh, and there's one batch of some solar panel manufacturer. The the pallet is on a standing um,
What? All the
mechanism.
way.
Yes,
Okay,
yes, yes.
I see.
So it's not
Interesting.
landscape, it's a portrait. So it
Wow.
comes in portrait. So it's pretty hard to manage uh, for to unloading and also hoisting it up to the CNI
Exactly.
roof. Yeah, so these are some of the
Exactly.
practical challenges that we have been facing and delaying the projects. You see,
Yeah.
uh,
So let me
but
ask you guys
nevertheless,
just sorry, KK, just on this point, because like I say, I'm personally keen to learn from you guys' experience in these markets. But just one more question here. So from a design perspective, a lot of the time we feel that yes, on rooftop, in general, if I use 660 versus 560, I should get a bit more power on the whole system, right? Well, that's what you're also saying. But something interesting happened. You see, on the rooftop is different from an open land. Open land, we can do whatever we want, like, in a sense. But rooftop, you have your HVAC, your aircon, your jack roof, and certain regulation. Like in Singapore, we have to leave certain walkway for the fire safety and so on. The point I'm making is recently, for approximately 3.5 megawatt roof, okay, a seriously large roof, um, we actually did comparison design using 565 versus 660. And you know what? The difference was almost the same. In fact, the 565 had higher number of panels because of the excess, let's say half meter or whatever it is of the bigger panel. I can't necessarily fit it into some of the available space when I have space constriction with rooftop. So I wanted to just ask both of you gentlemen, have you ever come across situation where actually the 660 or the largest panel size doesn't necessarily yield a larger system size?
No, from my perspective, I'm sorry, never heard of it. No, interesting to know though. I will definitely refer
Yeah.
that to my technical teams.
Yeah, I'd actually like to pick your brains
so
offline and compare notes in different markets, because I was so sure it would be bigger. In fact, on some of my smaller SME projects, like 500 kilowatt, definitely there was a difference. Almost 8% more. Okay. But then those are simple roof, man. It's just like a simple, straight, easy roof. When you have these gigantic facilities with all the different kind of protrusion and different challenges, that's when we found that in the same, for example, 1.9 meter area, I cannot fit the 2.2 meter panel. So yeah,
Wow.
it's interesting. What about for you, KK? Ever found that?
yeah. The solar panel power class choice is actually depends on the inverter choice that you also using, because the like you say, the efficiency of all these different power class, these one numbers are more or less the same. Okay, so
Some
Mr.
internet
Kong, are
connection.
you with us? Mr. Kong, hello. Are anybody of us able to hear Mr. Kong?
No.
No, not for me.
Okay, I'll just get in touch with him personally. Maybe he's facing some technical issues. By the time you can continue with the
Yeah.
discussion. Yeah.
Whoa, so let's just kick that around a bit. Kong made a nice point about inverter choice. So I'm actually quite keen to understand, as particularly in your market, how do you guys view different inverter manufacturers, or for that matter, different module manufacturers? Do you have supplier preferences? Do you have some kind of quality list? How do you assess?
So at the moment, we are as an investor, we have a list of inverter that we need to use. So for example, at the moment, we are keen to use a Huawei or Sungrow. So that's our top choice because of their capabilities and also the technical specs, their price range as well. So that's where okay, hi, KK is back. So so that's where our main preference is at the moment. I think Vietnam's market is a little bit has developed a little bit after the Singapore market, so we may have a little bit difference. So at the moment, we only have a few choices of inverter.
Interesting. Did you notice on the GoodWe presentation that they have different inverter class than the standard ones? They have like this 132 or something, or 170, which is very different from the standard Huawei's and the Sungrows.
Yeah,
What did you
yeah.
make of that? What did you make of that?
Um,
Maybe I can take that
Yeah,
yeah,
questions.
maybe.
yeah, that would be great, KK. We were waiting for you on the inverter. What did you make of that GoodWe one, with the different voltage and the different like string capacity?
The GoodWe. I have one of my project. I've used GoodWe before. So they have one of the highest single uh, this power class. Okay, um,
Hmm.
and it is using it can run on a very uh, high DC-AC ratio. Okay, so that makes the bell curve fatter. Okay, so which is more yield. Okay, the only challenge is when it's at peak and the fan is giving a quite uh, noise.
Yeah,
Okay,
it's a powerful fan,
so
right? We saw they showed in the slide. What, the
yeah,
fan
yeah, yeah,
looks like
yeah.
a aeroplane fan or something.
It's quite because they have to cool it down to
Sure.
maximize the generation. Uh, so that is a technology trade-off that you have to live with lah. You want a high performance, then you have to have a similarly high performance fan. Okay,
I hear you.
yeah.
What did you make about
So
the thing about the additional panels per string? Did you guys manage to actually achieve that in your project, where they noted that you can put 24 instead of 22 panel, for example, per string, because of the different power class they have, right? They're not the standard 100 kilowatt, or it's like 120 something or 130 something.
that one I'm not really familiar on that. Um, so coming back to this topic, I mean, one of the most important thing like is LCOE, right? So the return, okay, the choice of the technologies is all boiled down to the dollar and cents also. So how do you gentlemen, balance between this, the technology choices and also the return and the costing?
Maybe Wu, from an investor perspective, that would be good to know, particularly long term view.
Yeah, I mean, so so in terms of choice of technology, we are not. I think from I think I mean you guys may know that most of the equipment in the solar industry are quite mature. So they from us, they don't make a lot of difference. So in terms of whether we use a more expensive panels, for example, then we will have to go talk to the client and say, okay, here is what we are using, and we would have to, I guess, work on the benefit with the clients, and then as long as it makes sense for financially, then we can do the projects. But in terms of technology, yields, in terms of, I guess, productivities, um, it's difficult to tell the client that okay, here is this is one is more productive than the others.
Yeah, because it's over such a long term period, right? Yeah,
Exactly.
in fact, yeah, that's a really nice view, and KK, it's a good question. I actually had something in mind I wanted to share about this, which is again related to panel choice, module choice. Either the monofacial, i.e., single facial panels, or bifacial panels, right? That's one of the things that's also been trending recently. Just for the audience, a bifacial panel is a glass sheet frame, sorry, which allows cells to take power from both sides, technically speaking. Now, when you're on a roof with just 100 raise, the impact of a bifacial on additional yield is much less. Of course, if you're in a reservoir with a 1 meter raise with a lot of the reflection, the bifacial does produce more yield. But what's interesting is this, is that the bifacial, because it has glass frame, has a lower degradation over time. Yeah. Now, this is a really important point when it comes to the dollars and cents. So, really like you asked that question. When we do our financial modeling and projection, we have to assume several different parameters that will go 20 years in the future, right? One of them is how much energy will degrade in the panel. All panels have degradation. It's silicon, it's the nature of the material. Now, the monofacial or single facial panels have a degradation generally of 0.55% per year, right? Whereas your bifacial, because it's glass and they're more durable material, have a lower degradation. I think is zero point 0.4 something. Okay. Now, this is what's interesting. Over time, because every year you're losing less energy, you will get more yield and therefore more return over time, especially when that little percentage is over time, it becomes much bigger, right? But upfront, the bifacial panel generally costs a little bit more, maybe 1.5 $2 more per watt peak. So this is when we have to run our modeling to see whether the increased cost is worth the increased yield over time. And because we have the time value of money, i.e., tomorrow's money is worth less today, right, than money today, as investor will and EPC will definitely agree. The point is, a lot of times we find that yes, over time there is more benefit. But the big challenge, and this is where I echo you, Vu, it's hard to tell the customer, hey, pay me more today so that 15 years later you get more. You know? So that's
Yeah.
actually one of the challenges we face. And I would love to hear from your respective experiences what you think about it. What's your opinion, you know?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the Vietnamese client that I'm working with right now, they really looking at, they prefer a low risk, but in returns that is so for example, what we normally offer the client, whether they want to buy the electricity price at the discount of the EVN price, which EVN is the utilities state-owned utility company of Vietnam. So they save us. They are guaranteed to save a certain amount of money no matter what the EVN price is, right? And another option for us when we propose to the client is the fixed price. But overall, the fixed price is at the very first year, first a few years, it might be a little bit higher than what they're paying, so they don't save as much on the first few years. But then in the long run, it's a fixed price, right? So the price on the fit price going to be increasing over the year, because I mean the last 10 years, the Vietnamese EVN price has increased by 10% almost every year. So if they increase that by 10%, then the client would save more in the long run. But now, I mean, but from my experience, a lot of the client, they do look at what they are sure to save. It's not about the amount over the 20, 15 years of the contracts. So yeah, it's difficult to talk to the clients.
Yeah, the risk
So
appetite, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
very good. This is getting exciting. This we have touched on LCOE. I guess the bottom line is there must be a good LCOE. How about may I ask both you guys are developer? What kind of IRR that uh, to make it? What is your minimum IRR?
Yeah, good question. Good question, KK. I'll start with Singapore, and I just explain some background before I answer your question directly. You see, the return expectation of any investor or developer is commensurate to the risk they're taking, right? And of course, the risk is based around the client profile, based on the technology, which, as we mentioned, is mature. We know that, but it's also to do with country and political risk, right? So Singapore is known to be one of the more kind of stable AAA market in the region, although we are tiny compared to Malaysia, Vietnam, or Indonesia. There is a very low level of perceived government and political risk. So you can also look at certain indicators like inflation in countries, right? So when you look at all the different things, Singapore generally is considered a very safe bet. Therefore, your IRR is actually closer to the European or the US IRR expectation. Because frankly, cost of capital is also cheaper in Singapore because of the lower risk profile. So to answer your question, KK, with all this background, is we generally look for a minimum unlevered return of between 7.5 to 8.5%. The reason is when you apply the leverage or the bank financing, which is what we all need to grow, you can start to enjoy double-digit equity IRR return. Now, they're not going to be 15, 18% like your Malaysia FIT in the good old days or even the EVN tariffs in the good old days and the DPPAs, those have all come down. But what I'd be very interested to know, let's say Singapore is 8 to 9% unlevered, 11 to 12% levered. What about from Vietnam, and also KK? What are you seeing in Malaysia? That'd be really interesting to compare and contrast.
So from Vietnam, I'm not sure if I can disclose the IR, but I think it's a little bit more than Singapore, and I know that we are because of the global recessions, we are looking at an increase in the IR threshold in the next few months, and yeah.
Yeah, fair,
I see.
fair.
As for Malaysia, it used to be like the investors is always wanting the good old days is at least 15%, then over the years drop to 12, 13%, then become slightly lower end of the double digit, 10 plus, now it's like drop to, yeah, like Sam had mentioned, if we can get 7, 8%, so unlevered is actually considered quite good already nowadays. Yeah,
Yeah,
There's this exchange risk. I'm not sure if Sam mentioned. So if you
yeah, good
sell the
point.
EPP, the PPA price based on the local currency, then it would be different than the USD, for example.
That's a good point. Yeah, it's interesting, how KK, how over the years, I mean, we've all been around this industry for a long time, but I tell you, over the years, the return expectation has fallen, but volumes have increased significantly. That's for sure. And secondly, the cost of financing, the bank capital, also to some extent have come down. But in this current volatile world, right? We mentioned this in the panel yesterday. High inflation rate, threat of war that's spilling over into other parts, commodity shortage, supply chain shortage, shipping issues. In this type of world, then the question I just wanted to kick up for our discussion is, you know, how does the wider environment affect the choices we make for our supplies and materials? Because that's what this panel is about, and technology choice. For example, from your side, KK, you guys are right in the line of fire, right? You have to commit to building contracts for developers and investors, and you are subject to a lot of the supply chain shock. So, how do you manage that, or what are your views there with regards to this technology selection now?
yeah. Malaysia has been a challenging year. Our USD and ringgit exchange rate have spiked up quite a lot. Okay, so those are the challenging space. But in terms of using technology to manage it, probably is a selection of the panel power class to have to have some saving in this balance of systems. Okay, because if you use less number of modules, then you will be using uh, less number of this mounting structure, the big clamp, end clamp. Uh, but having said that, the saving is actually um, not really making a big impact. Okay, so again, is managing the, like Wu mentioned, the exposure of the exchange rate is much more important. Okay, uh, so how about you guys?
Yeah, maybe Wu, from I'd love to hear from your perspective. You mentioned you have a list of suppliers, right? So I believe you guys are relying, like counting on trusted suppliers rather than open market sourcing.
Yeah, I mean we don't face a shortage of supply of equipment yet, but the price has increased over the last few months. So that's the situation that we're in right now. But yeah, but if the price increased, then we go back to our client. Hey, here's what's going on, and we adjust the benefits.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
Makes sense. From our perspective, the reason I'm asking this is a recent pain point. Um, the thing is, it's not necessarily a shortage in the particular solar industry, but sometimes downstream supply shortage. For example, about a few months ago, there was a chip shortage, right? Microchip shortage. So all the inverter delays, inverter shipments were 8 weeks, 12 weeks for stuff coming from China, right? Huawei, last time SMA used to have from Germany, used to have those 3-month waits. and usually we would get plenty of stock of Huawei and Sungrow locally. But recently there has been a significant delay, and a lot of the suppliers were pointing to upstream shortages, such as these microchip shortage. So that's why, from our perspective, I mean, of course, we probably don't have the level of scale as guys like EDF, but certainly our investors have solid supply chain. So that's what we've learned, to stick to trusted suppliers, particularly when our necks are on the line with liquidated damages and whatnot. But it's also, yeah, it's a volatile world right now. Is what we are seeing.
Okay, great. So probably we move on to another topic, as in understanding the best structure technology suitable for different type of the roof. So I would guess when you choose a project, especially for those project that you are investing yourself, so how do you do assessment on that?
So at the moment,
What
let
is
me
it?
let me back up a little bit. So on about the Vietnamese market. I'm sorry, you finished your question, right? I'm sorry, I heard something.
No, I finished. So go ahead, Wu.
Okay, okay, yeah. So the Vietnamese market. So at the moment, the utilities that we are facing a constraint of the utility grids of Vietnam. So the solar rooftop projects are the only type of projects in being encouraged by the government. So all the utility scales are being kind of postponed at the moment. So including solar, floating solar, wind, onshore and offshore, all the LNG projects are being kind of paused at the moment. So but then manufacturers are still demanding for solar renewable energy. So now, so the only thing that they can do now is solar rooftop for CNI. But we can only do so much, right? Because it depends. It's an on-grid system, so we can only provide 20-30% to the clients. How do we provide the rest? I mean, some companies, for example, they export to Nike and Adidas. They have to go to 100% renewables by 2050, for example. So if they do that, then how do we help the clients to achieve that level of commitment? So BESS is the only way. So a lot of clients, they are looking to us to provide them with a solution for BESS. I mean, fortunately, we do. I mean, as from a investor, we do own about 1.2 gig of BESS already. So we are constantly working with an expert in France to apply BESS into the Vietnamese market. But at the moment, the regulations is just not there yet, and also the EVN price in Vietnam is really low. Is so
What is it right now,
technology
Boo?
is
What is the price?
right now it's about 1.8 thousand. So I 5 6 cents. Let me give me a quick calculations. 6 cents. So 5 6 cents per kilowatt hours. One of the probably the cheapest in the world right now. So if we apply BESS and we sell to client at like 7 8 9 cents, it's not financially feasible. But yeah, we're monitoring the situation, monitoring the technology. As soon as it's okay, we apply as a client. So, but at the moment, there's not a BESS system in Vietnam. It's not popular yet.
Yeah, that's such a good point you brought up from the battery energy storage system, BESS. I was really hopeful we get to dive into that. So you made a really good point, the economic incentive vis-a-vis the regulation restriction, right? For example, in Vietnam, we heard yesterday that there's still that 1.2 megawatt DC cap. And also they're quite strict about definition of certain roofs and where you can connect. So it was really interesting to understand a bit more on yesterday's panel about the regulatory landscape in Vietnam, and also the gap between the on-ground reality as well as what's we hear in the news. But that actually got me thinking. In the Singapore context, one of the things that have happened this year, sorry, in the last 12 months, 12 to 14 months, is energy prices have shot through the roof. The USEP, the pool price of Singapore, has increased from 15 cents maybe 16 months ago, 15 months ago, to 30 cents today, Singapore dollar cents, which is roughly 1.4 to US. The point I'm making is The same thing that we used to almost scoff at. We were like, battery, who's going to put battery in Singapore? Wow, the tariff is not there, or our grid is so stable. Now suddenly it's shifting. Okay. When your client is paying, let's say, 25 odd US dollar cents in an irradiation area, not as high as central Vietnam, but more than Hanoi for sure. We have a reasonable yield of 1300, something around KL area, JB area. So with that kind of yield and that kind of cost, suddenly the battery makes a lot of sense, man. So developers like ourselves, who used to just keep very straight PPA on site to the customer, now are starting to see, firstly, a big trend away from PPA to self-purchase. Because if your energy price is now 30 cents, instead of getting a 20% discount from developer who's laughing his way to the bank, you will simply invest your own capital and enjoy a 3-year return in Singapore for SME. It's a no-brainer, right? So in this scenario, suddenly the integration of battery starts to make a lot of economic sense. And in fact, our government has recently announced, as you guys may have heard in the news, a large battery program where they're doing battery farms and so on. It's kind of energy storage, ESS, is moving into the policy space, which then means it starts to move into commercial space. So that was a really good point on the economic incentive of using battery or not. But there's a second application which I find really interesting. And again, yesterday's panel, we talked about this kind of open energy market in Singapore, right? We're 100% liberalized, one of the few in the country, in the region. Now, what has started to happen, and we, Solar Horizon, have been in this space, the direct to grid project. So far, it's been behind the meter, right? We connect to the client's internal distribution network, we feed his facility, balance gets exported, then we sell it to other people or to the grid. Now we can do what's called direct to grid, where we connect to the substation. Now, usually it's been happening on these solar floating projects. It's all over the news, right? Some of the big guys are doing these 100, 200, 300 megawatt floating solar projects where they inject everything into the high tension substation and then sell it through the grid via virtual PPA or contract for difference. In fact, Malaysia recently launched a similar corporate green procurement program. We talked about that yesterday. But here's the point. So from one of our projects, we recently learned the hard way. So for example, it's a 1 megawatt PV 1 megawatt worth of rooftop space. Okay. The sanction load currently is like 1 plus 1.1 MVA. The thing is, when we wanted to do the whole roof, which makes sense, right? Maximize all the roof. When we applied to Singapore grid, the sanction load that we were given that we are able to inject with was around 500 kilowatt. Now, in this situation, we're like, man, how does this work? Because I have to pay rental for the whole roof, right? I have to still do all the application and licensing, and I've done my modeling based on 1 megawatt. Now, Scully, I can only do half. And this is where the idea came in, right, for direct to grid projects. And it's nothing new. I'm not saying anything that anybody doesn't know. It's just that we're actually applying it now, so I can talk meaningfully about it. But the idea is, or we're evaluating, using the battery to then dispatch the solar power over 24 hours continuously below the sanction load. You see? Now, this is challenging, I can tell you from first-hand experience, both on the technical side, because it's new, but also on the commercial side, because it's a different game, right? You're playing the kind of arbitrage game under full price. But anyway, using the battery for what I call is this kind of peak shaving or kind of sanction load matching is happening in Singapore. We're doing it. So I'd love to hear from you, gentlemen, particularly also KK from Malaysia. I know there was like the MD is a big pain point, right? Your maximum demand charges, and people have been looking at battery to shave off or try to reduce your MD. But from your experience, gentlemen, I'd love to hear. I'm sure audience would love to hear. How are you looking at battery on an applied perspective?
For Malaysia, our this utilities cost, the tariff is heavily subsidized. So, resulting that at the moment, relatively around this region, Malaysia is one of the lowest, enjoying the lowest electricity tariff. So, and most of the place, most of the premises do not have this on peak off peak differences. Okay,
Mm.
so resulting the uptaking of a battery is still a bit slow. So But we are seeing a trend that the government is going to reduce or remove slowly but surely the subsidy. So when the tariff go up, then it will be the natural catalyst to make the battery or BSS sell like a hot cake. Hopefully in near future. So
I like
that's
that optimism, KK. I like it.
yeah. So how about Wu, Mr. Wu? Your side, the battery is it? I heard last time the solar farm. There are some requirement or there are some to because there are a lot of this curtailment. So
curtailment.
then
Yes,
curtailment. Yeah.
curtailment, correct.
What happened to that?
So, all I mean, as I'm not sure if I mean
Is it still
you heard
happening?
correctly. Yeah, you heard correctly. The curtailment happened during the COVID time because of a lot of factories had to shut down. So there's not a lot of demand. The reduction there's reduced demand of energy during that time. So the government has to reduce their supply. That's normal. But everything. So all also COVID has hopefully passed in Vietnam right now, and factories have resumed to our normal operation. So we don't have a lot of curtailment at the moment. But still, but for new projects, we the government doesn't allow fit anymore, which means that we cannot sell up to the grids to EVN, for example. So right now, all we need to we can only sell to the clients. So in order to apply BESS, we have to store the energy. I mean, so utilize a roof. That's what it is. Instead of selling to the grids, we have to. If we have a bigger roof than the client needs, then we have to. We want to apply BESS in order to store the energy when the client doesn't use it, and sell to the client when they have the demand. Say later during the day when the sun's not available, or during a windy day or a cloudy days, for example.
I see.
Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean
yeah.
that is very interesting. So, and energy storage. So, is there any like the government any government incentive in Singapore that if you install battery, I subsidize you, or how does it
Yeah,
work
it's
in Singapore?
so I said this yesterday also, and I'll say it again. But in Singapore, subsidy is a vulgar word. We do not offer subsidies, but what we do is create a very robust environment that has streamlined grid policies, have a lot of support from our government, a lot of marketing, advertising in terms of green plans and whatnot, a lot of awareness building, honestly. And that's the thing in a country where the economic incentive is as clear as daylight that you will have a 3 year payback from solar installation. Um, I don't think subsidies needed, honestly. Now, with a battery, to answer your question, KK, there's no, as far as I know, and I do know my market pretty well, but nobody will give me money or give me a tax rebate if I use a battery. Okay. However, there are, as part of Singapore's green plan, targets to create enough. We call these sandboxes. Okay, the Singapore is good with these, where we create a sandbox for new technology to play around with, to see how the grid stability will be impacted, to see how the economics will work out, to see if the industry can actually deliver on the promises. So most recently, there was 100 megawatt hour battery farm announced in Jurong Island, which is the industrial island off the coast of Singapore. Now, from what I understand, it's not a 100 megawatt solar farm because we just don't have that kind of space. It is 100 megawatt hour battery farm. Now, I believe this is going to be one of the kind of showcase that battery technology is mature at grid scale. Because of course on our CNI it's 1 megawatt, 100 kilowatt is okay, lah, we know it works. But at grid scale, when you have 100 megawatt solar fluctuation, how do you balance the grid's intermittency issue, right? So that's currently happening, at least has been announced. But from my understanding, it's going to be an economic driver rather than a subsidized driver. And frankly, I think the economics are there already, but time will tell.
Okay. So, um, as for just like to share about Malaysia recently have launched this virtual PPA program, from that investors, developers can apply from the size of 5 mega to 30 mega. Okay, so and this is a quite a landmark program for Malaysia energy space, where we are moving towards a non-subsidized renewable energy program, where the fixed tariff, large scale ground mounted solar or FIT program, okay, which are heavily subsidized. So, how about the other, like in Singapore or Vietnam? Is there such a thing? I remember Vietnam has this DPPA. So,
Yes, the
probably
DPPA
you can
scheme.
share what's the development of that.
So the DPPA scheme, the government had issued a draft, I think, second or third draft already. But due to some political situation at the moment, we don't see that coming out until probably mid or end of next year. And
Oh,
so
really? Ah,
yeah, so it's gonna be delayed. And once that, I mean, this is only a pilot program, so the government only allow 1,000 megawatt of DPPA to for the pilot program, and it take another year for the project to be built. So we don't see that as a that's a good enough for some of our potential client, because they have to reach a certain milestone of carbon reduction by 2023, for example. Yeah, so that's not fast enough. And it's only the first pilot program, and we don't know when the actual program is um, it's gonna be available. So for it's we don't yeah, it's gonna be a few more years at least.
So the DPPA is actually means offsite, sell directly to the
It's a virtual
factories.
DPPA. It's a virtual DPPA.
Okay,
Yeah.
sell to the grid or sell to
yes.
the factory.
So it's a CFD, contract for difference. So basically, it's sell to the grid, and the grid sell to the it's the remotes. We use that utility, the
Yeah,
EVN grids
offsite.
to
Yeah,
do
it's the way
offsite.
we call it. Yeah. Yeah,
And
KK is
so
very
that
similar to the Malaysia program. The difference is it's similar to Malaysia program. It applies to the large scale generator, right? For example, a lot of the FIT stuff that was not built in time, or in Vietnam's case, that was built but curtailed. A lot of that excess capacity is just selling to the wholesale market at very low price and very fluctuating price, right? So banks won't finance it, and developers are stuck there. So I think that's why the ability, and frankly, it's modeled on Singapore's market, which is modeled on the European markets, a virtual PPA, where, for example, similarly like Malaysia, we generate in point X, sell to the wholesale price, which is moving. The consumer in point B buys from the wholesale price, which is moving, but we then agree between each other on a fixed rate. So the
Yep.
contract for difference means, let's say I sell to grid, it's 10 cents, right? But my agreement with client is 10, as 12, he will top up 2 cents. Conversely, if the next month the grid price is 8, then I will top up, right? It's a contract for difference. Very similar to Malaysia one, actually. And that's modeled on Singapore. The thing I will comment on Singapore is this the difference. In fact, on this project that we are currently executing, megawatt scale for a large maritime MNC from Finland, it's very interesting. Out of the 1 point X megawatt, I can't reveal exactly, X percentage is being consumed by the client. And of course, as we know in PV, the output is higher in the day. Clearly, there's more sunlight in the day. And a lot of load profiles of sites are quite constant, right? So you have this delta. Now, in Singapore, that delta is exported to the grid, right? So it is not necessarily like I mentioned earlier, the direct to grid. It's not a custom built generator. It is an export model where X percent is used by customer on site, Y percent goes to the grid. So it is that Y percent that we enter into a VPPA, right, with one of the energy retailers who's also on selling green energy to their clients. Now, I can't really reveal exactly the secret sauce how it works, but it is a CFD, cash for difference contract. There are certain assignments of benefits and attributes, and it can be structured in a way where that solar electron, even though it disappears into the grid, the green attributes of that solar electron using a financial instrument can then be passed on, right? So
Yeah.
it's in a way helping other customers achieve their green targets when either A, their roofs cannot support their entire usage, which I think Wu, you said at the start, generally 20 to 30% if we're lucky. Or B, if there's no land in the country from which to generate, which is Singapore, right? So when you mentioned 1,000 megawatts, Wu, and that's the point, Vietnam and Singapore, for us, we'd be like, wow, 1,000 megawatt program, enough for 4 years. For you guys, you're like, wow, it's a pilot. I can't even do anything with it.
Yeah. So you see, Wu. So we are
Yeah.
so envy you. You know, you have so many. You are always talking about gigawatt.
We
Come
talk
to
kilowatt in
Vietnam.
Singapore,
We yeah, yeah. You guys should come to Vietnam. It's a lot of room
Yeah.
for everybody.
Okay. Good. So, um, I guess anyone want to add some others comment before we wrap up and for open for Q and A?
I would just like to tell that we don't have questions as of now, so everybody can give them closing remarks and we can end the session.
Yes. So maybe Wu first. Closing remark.
um, Closing
Come
remark.
to Vietnam.
In Vietnam.
Yeah,
So
there's room for everybody. Yeah, we'll
yeah,
come
yeah,
too.
welcome, I guess. But yeah, seriously, but yeah, so I mean, fortunately, we are part of DDF Renewables, so we have a very good reputation. So if anybody wants to learn or discuss the potential Vietnamese opportunity, feel free to reach out to me. And then yeah, that's it.
Okay. So Sam.
Yeah, thanks, KK and Wu. I just want to mention one point. All of us are active in the region. There's a big trend recently for MNCs to start tendering regional-wide deals, right? Because the more scale they can club together, the better economics it happens. The challenge is, as we all know, each market is different, each regulation is different. But the point I'd like to make is, as an entrepreneur, as a founder-owned and operated business, we did not get acquired. We stuck to our independence. So we always like to reach out to other companies in our fields. So my closing remarks is, guys, let's collaborate. Anytime we have opportunity for regional MNC tender, at least for Vietnam, I know I will come to you, Wu. And similarly, KK to in Malaysia. So similarly, if any of your client have headquarters in Singapore or there's any regional deals, we can come together and form a kind of bid consortium and support our clients in multiple regions, leveraging our common interest. So that's my key message. Let's collaborate.
Yes, fully agree. So um, Southeast Asia must come together, as and spice up our clean and renewable energy. Let's do this together. So I welcome anyone that are interested, to come to Malaysia to for projects. Reach out to me, and I'll be more than happy to support. Okay. So yeah, look forward to have more travelings, to Singapore, to Vietnam, to anywhere. Thank you, Priyashi.
Thank you
Thank
so much,
you.
all the panelists and the attendees as well. And thank you so much, Kong sir, for moderating the session. We promise to come back with more such exciting topics very soon. Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Thank you, everybody. See you. Have a good
Thank
Take
weekend.
you.
care.
Bye.
Bye
Take care,
bye.
Wu. Take care, Sam.
Take care, Kong. Thanks
Bye.
again. See you, Wu. We'll
Bye.
be in touch. Bye
Thank you.
bye.
Thank you, Sam. Bye, KK.